Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive systemic risk in consumer finance. Specifically, we're looking at how a globally recognized accounting standard diagnoses the way a bank's compensation policies can actually encourage selling products that are terrible for the customer.
Ever really thought about what happens when your banker is paid specifically to sell you more debt? It's a huge question, right? It gets right to the core of the friction between aggressive corporate revenue growth and the actual financial well-being of the consumer. Ultimately, it all comes down to incentives.
Here is our roadmap for today. First, the selling practices problem. Second, when pay drives behavior. Third, add-on products and risk. Fourth, tracking the consumer fallout. And finally, transparency and trust.
Okay, Section 1, the selling practices problem.
To really understand this, we're looking at the SASB standard for consumer finance, which is now managed by the IFRS Foundation. This isn't just academic theory, It's the exact diagnostic framework that global investors use to monitor risk. It gives us a way to measure if a bank is actually protecting long-term value or just squeezing out short-term revenue.
Moving right along to Section 2, when pay drives behavior.
So the root cause of this whole issue? It almost always starts with the employee's paycheck. The standard explicitly tracks what's called variable remuneration. Basically, that's any pay that isn't fixed. For the folks selling you financial products, it's usually tied directly to their sales volume. And the danger there is pretty obvious. When an employee has to hit a target just to get paid, they are unintentionally but inherently encouraged to sell you things you might not actually need. It's a really stark contrast. Fixed pay is permanent, it's tied to seniority, and it doesn't bounce around based on performance. Variable pay, on the other hand, fluctuates. It is strictly linked to products sold, and as the standard bluntly points out, this variable pay provides incentives for risk assumption. It essentially pushes employees to gamble with a customer's financial health just to maximize their own earnings. Because of that inherent danger, investors demand to see a specific breakdown. They want to know the exact percentage of total pay that is variable. Why? Because a massive chunk of variable pay is a giant red flag. It points to a culture relying on aggressive sales targets, which, let's face it, almost always breeds deceptive practices.
Which brings us to Section 3, add-on products and risk.
When employees are heavily incentivized to sell, they often push what are called add-on products. The SASB framework defines these as supplementary products offered at an additional cost to the consumer. Think debt protection, identity theft protection, or credit score tracking. Now here is the critical need for transparency. When an institution fails to be completely transparent about these primary and add-on products, it's a deceptive practice. And the result? Customers unwittingly end up holding portfolios that contain incredibly high concentrations of risk and hidden costs.
To catch these practices, the standard requires institutions to disclose some really crucial data points. Investors look at the average fees from add-on products, the average annual percentage rate, the average age of those credit products, and the average number of credit accounts a customer actually has. If customers suddenly have an unusually high number of accounts, or those add-on fees are spiking, that perfectly reveals a bank relying on aggressive short-term tactics rather than sustainable banking. Let's dive into Section 4, tracking the consumer fallout.
What we see here is a very natural domino effect. It's practically a straight line. Step 1, aggressive variable incentives push the employees. Step 2, that leads to opaque, non-transparent add-on sales. Step 3, consumers eventually realize the high concentrations of risk and cost they're holding, which leads to formal customer complaints. And finally, Step 4, those complaints escalate into legal proceedings and massive monetary losses.
And accounting standards meticulously track this entire fallout. Financial entities actually have to disclose the exact number of customer complaints filed. They track these across specific products, like credit cards, student loans, or payday loans, and they categorize the issues, where the complaints about selling practices, sneaky fees and interest, misleading advertising, or trouble closing the account. This level of granular detail shows exactly where the trust is breaking down. When those complaints inevitably escalate, it hits the bottom line directly. Metric FNCF-270A.5 measures the total amount of monetary losses as a result of legal proceedings associated with selling and servicing products. We aren't just talking about a bad PR day here. We are talking about real financial damage, civil judgments, regulatory penalties, restitution. A lack of transparency fundamentally destroys corporate value.
Finally, Section 5, transparency and trust.
So what's the solution?
Well, the SASB's quantitative metrics for selling practices explicitly demand granular transparency. By forcing institutions to publicly disclose their variable pay structures and legal losses, transparency acts as the ultimate shield against deceptive practices. You simply cannot hide a toxic sales culture when you are forced to publish the math behind it.
And here is why this matters, and what you should really take away from this explainer today. Providing consumer finance products focused on the customer's best interest isn't just some regulatory hurdle. It is a highly profitable core business strategy. Doing so builds immense trust with new and existing customers. It naturally expands market share, and it ensures sustainable revenue growth over the long term. Much better than a quick buck that ends in a lawsuit.
The source text itself provides this incredibly powerful summary. Trends towards consumer protection and transparency have aligned and will continue to align the interests of society with those of long-term investors. It's a brilliant realization, really. What is good for the everyday consumer, like transparent fees, products that actually help them, and reps who aren't forced to push unnecessary debt, is ultimately exactly what's good for the long-term stability and profitability of the financial institution itself.
Which brings us to the end of our diagnosis and leaves us with one final, crucial question. Does the financial institution you use every single day rely on short-term revenue generation fueled by variable sales incentives, or are they built on transparent, long-term value creation? Next time you're offered an add-on product at the bank, you'll know exactly what might be happening behind the scenes. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the right questions.